Sharing her fearless story with us today, please welcome Christina Tink to the stage.
So 2018 was the year of the woman. We saw 102 women elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. The New York Stock Exchange selected its first female president in its 200-year-plus history. And we're all here today at a conference called the One Woman Fearless Summit, where people are sharing stories of breaking barriers. It's a great time to be a woman. Would you agree? Well, before we start celebrating too much, I'd like to ask you to look at some numbers with me for just a moment, because as they say, the numbers don't lie. So in terms of female leadership in the workplace, I want you to look at the top three numbers first. 1 in 5, 1 in 25, and 38%. What do you think 1 in 5 might represent? Supervisors? Okay. 1 in 5 is the number of women that will rise to a senior leadership position in their career. How about 1 in 25, which is only 4%? A CEO, maybe you're thinking that's who would rise to a senior C-suite position. Actually, 1 in 25 represents the number of women of color that will ever rise to a senior leadership position. And 38% represents the total percentage of women in any type of management position in an organization right now. Ladies, these numbers are from the 2018 annual report, published by McKinsey & Company through the Lean In organization. They represent 279 companies that employ more than 13 million people. Now, how about the bottom numbers? 55%, 48%, and 45%. Those are a little higher numbers, right? Well, unfortunately, these numbers have to do with sex-based harassment in the workplace from the same report. So 55% of women in a senior leadership position report that they have experienced sex-based harassment, 48% of lesbian women, and 45% of women in the tech-based industry still reporting sex-based harassment. Wow, as someone just said. You know, when I share these numbers with audiences, they're usually a little shocked, frankly, and obviously disappointed. I mean, the media is telling us that the tides are changing, right? The truth of the matter is, we still have a lot of work to do. And it's women like you and I that are in this room that are going to make that change possible. As Charla said, I have no doubt that it will be women who change the world for the better. But we're not going to do it by sitting back, reading books, and just listening to people speaking. We have to get engaged and involved in the movement. Why is this so important? Why does talking about the stories that we're telling as female leaders matter more now than ever? Because we do have a spotlight on us. Because there's a generation of girls growing up who have never known a world without Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, and constant comparison right in their hand. What stories are they hearing from us, their mothers, their aunts, their grandmothers? We need to consider this. As Robin Ely says, to make progress on this problem, people must take risks, learn new ways, and experiment. In the past, when we've experienced great social change in this country, it looks very similar to what we've seen over the last couple of years. A group of people starts to rise up. They start to protest, to speak out. But if others don't join in with them, what happens? It slowly goes away, and we go right back to where we were before. It's time for us to start changing what we're doing. You know, I get asked a lot, my official title is Corporate Storyteller and Courage Cultivator. And I get asked, what is a corporate storyteller? It sounds kind of interesting and intriguing to people. Frankly, storytelling is a really popular topic right now. In the last 6 months, I've been asked to teach workshops for business students at the Virginia Commonwealth University on storytelling as they prepare for interviews. I've also worked with corporate bank executives to help tell the story of their organizations in a way that connects to the hearts and minds of the people that they serve. Stories have this incredible ability to captivate us, right? It's how we've passed down our history through generations, and a story is how we really tap into the essence of who a person is. Over the last 6 months, I've had the opportunity to interview senior female leaders from organizations ranging in size of 15 employees to multinational organizations with tens of thousands of employees. Throughout these interviews, one theme became abundantly clear. The stories that women are telling in the workplace have a very direct impact on our individual career trajectory, but more importantly, a peripheral impact on all the women around us. So, let's look at the types of stories that women are telling. I'm going to share with you 3 types of stories that women are telling and whether they're helping or hindering us and what we can do to see a positive change. Before we do that, I'll start by telling you just a little bit of my backstory. So I am the daughter of a very brave and generous businesswoman. My mother has actually stood in Times Square as the bell was rung in for 2 banks that she's helped take public. She still runs the marketing department of a very large community banking system right here in Texas, and I don't think that'll change anytime soon. She's an incredible woman and a great inspiration to me. Her mother, my grandmother, who will turn 90 next April, was forced into retirement at age 78 after a long and rewarding career that started before she was 20 years old. So I guess it's fair to say that business and leadership are in my blood. But I want you to consider for a moment that little girl, right? Did she know what was ahead of her? Did she know the story that she was supposed to live? None of us knows our story. We've heard some wonderful speakers today talk about the fact that sometimes our life unfolds for us, right? It's not always us driving the bus. But I'd like to suggest to you today that the stories that you're telling do have an impact and give you some power to make your story what you want it to be. If you would for a moment, I'd like you to just close your eyes with me. Indulge me here. Close your eyes, take a breath, and with your eyes closed, I want you to think of a woman who really inspires you. A woman who gives you hope in the future. I want you to picture this woman's face, and I want you to hear her voice. Feel this woman's energy. And go ahead and open your eyes. Let me ask you, what is it when you picture that woman that inspires you so much about her? Is it her power and prestige, the position that she's risen to? Is it her money or her physical beauty? Maybe it's her perfectly curated Instagram feed. No. What inspires us most about great women is the story of who they are and how they became. When we think about women like Oprah Winfrey, J.K. Rowling, Ellen DeGeneres, Malala Yousafzai, these are women who have overcome incredible challenges and pain and suffering in their life. And it's not that they're rich and famous that we admire them. We admire the triumph of their journey. We want to know what happens between this moment and this one. We all have a story, and our stories matter. So let's talk about the 3 types of stories that women are telling. The first type of stories that women are telling are the ones that we're telling about each other. I interviewed a senior leader from a very large multinational organization in the financial sector. Now, this is a woman who knows a thing or two about hard work. She has served in the US military, she holds multiple degrees, and she raises 2 kids with her physician husband. Over the course of a 45-minute phone conversation, this woman told me stories of being bullied, manipulated, and even held back from promotion in her organization, which has been voted a best place to work for more than a decade. Now, some of us in the room probably can relate to this story, right? So I ask you, who was it that was doing the bullying? Who was doing the manipulating? Was it the good old boys? It was the very women that she worked with every single day, largely by the stories that they were telling. Now, ladies, I'm not talking about workplace gossip here. What I'm talking about is the coercive result of our need to keep other women small that stems from a scarcity mindset. You see, if I believe that there's only one seat at the table, I have to knock you out of the way to be sure that I can get it, right? And this leads us to the second kind of story that came up in interview after interview. The second type of story that women are telling are the ones that tear us apart. These are the ones that divide us, even as a group of women. One woman I interviewed has worked her way up from the very lowest level of an organization up into a high-ranking managerial position. And she shared some incredible stories with me about being mentored and sponsored, all the things that we know works and helps women to succeed. But when I asked her what it was that she thought more women need to be doing now, you know what she told me? She said, you know what? I learned how to play like a man, and that's what women need to do. They need to learn to play like a man. Wow, I was really glad we were on a phone call because I'm pretty sure my eyes about popped out of my head. Wasn't what I expected, but then again, I thought about these stories that tear us apart. The ones that make some of us right and some of us wrong, some of us good and some of us bad, right? I'm a good working mom because I don't hire nannies and run myself ragged. She's a bad working woman because she prioritizes her career over her family. Linda's a great leader because she speaks up in meetings. Jana's weak because she holds her tongue when things get heated. I mean, the list could go on and on. But as long as we're divided among our own tribe, we lose the potential of our collective power as a group of women marching in the same direction, even though we may disagree on certain topics. This is the oldest trick in the book. Keep the people divided among themselves, and they can't make forward progress. And we're perpetuating it every day in the stories that we tell. And this leads us to the third and final kind of story that we are telling as women. These are the stories that we're telling about ourselves. Are we telling stories of truth and courage like we're watching women get up here and do today? Or are we more frequently telling stories that are hiding a part of ourselves? Are we letting fear and shame and scarcity mindset lead us to tell stories of pretending, of covering up, and always striving to be enough? Again, this was a theme that emerged from the interviews that I have done. So, as you heard Charla share with you, from the time I was 15 years old, I struggled severely with anorexia and eventually bulimia, largely fueled by crippling anxiety and perfectionism that was a result of experiencing my brother's traumatic car accident where he was brain dead and in a coma for weeks, and my beautiful, stable suburban life was turned upside down with no idea of what was going to happen. My response in that time as a 15-year-old girl was to control the one thing that I could control: my food intake and my body. Looking back, it seems really logical. I mean, this has now been fully understood in psychology. But as you can imagine, over the course of those 12 years, my parents took me in and out of treatment facilities and hospitals, praying and hoping that I could find a way to get better. My brother, thankfully, had a miraculous recovery. He does now have a family. He lives a thriving life. He has paralysis on part of his body. But for all practical standards, he experienced and we experienced a miracle. But you know, sometimes the pain of our past doesn't disappear just because the miracle arrives, does it? It's still part of our story. But for years, I was hiding this part of myself. Since I was 22 years old, I had been defined by my incredible and early sales success. I had the shiny new car, the pretty clothes. As you can see, I still like good shoes. A brand new house. I wasn't even 30 years old, and I bought a house on Allen Parkway in Houston, Texas. I had it all. And on paper, I looked damn near perfect. But I could not let the leaders of companies that I was working for, IBM, Oracle, I couldn't let them know how weak I was, how disgusting my history was. Right? Who would let someone like that lead people? Who would ever believe that a woman like that could change the world? I was telling myself a story that simply wasn't true. And maybe you're telling yourself a similar story today. Maybe you're telling yourself that you're flawed, that you're broken, damaged goods, and that we can never change what happens in the past. That simply isn't true. As Marianne Williamson says, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It's our light and not our darkness that frightens us most. And so we ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, talented, fabulous? And as Marianne answers that question, who the heck are we not to be? We are living in a time when women are being called to courage. We are living in a time where we have an opportunity to change the kind of environments, organizations, and communities that our young daughters and sons can be part of. And I don't know about you, but I'm simply not willing to give up on that dream of a better, more equitable, more courageous, and most of all, more truthful world. The universe will support our truth. The one positive theme that emerged from the research that I've done is that woman after woman who shared a story of getting rid of her cape, taking off her mask, whatever analogy you want to use, that is when that woman's life changed for the better. That is when that woman was put into a position, a spotlight, an opportunity to speak or share her story, but most importantly, that she began to live with an authenticity that had magnetic power to it. She wasn't having to apply for promotions. People were coming to her, asking her to lead. She wasn't having to go out and, beg for people to listen. The world is asking us for courage right now. The world is asking us for authenticity. Harnessing the power of our true stories is what will allow us to lead with authenticity and courage. And this is what the organizations that I have the opportunity to work with are asking me to come in and do every day. Big, huge companies that you see publicly traded that look like they have it all together, guess what? They're hurting, man. They have people inside their organizations at high leadership positions, just like we heard Dr. Brittany talk about earlier, that are struggling with depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, burnout, and people are doing it alone. Most of all, women. Particularly the higher a woman gets in her career, the more the need to hide is, right? So I'd like you to just picture with me for one moment the story of the Japanese bowl, and some of you might have heard of it before. But in the culture of Japan, there's beautiful clay pottery, beautiful bowls that have been handmade and passed down through centuries. When a bowl falls and breaks, they don't toss it in the trash. They don't consider it damaged. Do you know what they do with it? They take the pieces and they carefully put them back together, and they fill the cracks in with gold. Shimmering, gorgeous, light-filled gold. And in their culture, that bowl is considered more beautiful than it was in its original form. This is the story of who we are. We are that bowl, and if we let our cracks show, the light can get in. And then we can be the wings for another woman on her journey. This is how women rise together, ladies. We start being brave one at a time, and we invite the woman next to us to join us on that journey. We can become the wings of another woman. And the future of female leadership is in the stories that we tell. It's time for us to start telling the right stories at the right time to become the leaders that we were born to be. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christina.
Thank you.